Item: SCP-763. Object Class: Safe. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-763 is contained in Sub-Basement G of the now-defunct Veal Production Facility on the outskirts of Illinois. After the discovery of SCP-763, the Foundation acquired the facility, which was secured and designated biological site. The facility is still supplied with the liquid feed solution previously used to nourish veal calves, though only enough to maintain SCP-763's growth. The feeding system established by the facility's previous owner, Klaus, has been documented and should be maintained unless a more efficient feeding method is devised. If any components are added to SCP-763, the dosage of nutrient solution must be scaled up accordingly. Consult document SCP-763 for the volume and release time of solution to be provided per component. Because of SCP-763's ability to absorb human organic matter into itself, it is vitally important that no personnel touch SCP-763 with bare skin. Description: SCP-763 is a mass of human organic tissue occupying approximately 300 square meters of space with an estimated mass of over 4,000 kilograms. It is mostly in an irregular configuration of tissue, with the exception of SCP-763-A. Much of the mass of SCP-763 is muscular tissue with an abundance of blood vessels. This muscle tissue is highly atrophied and non-motile, though despite lack of use there is a great amount of blood flow at all times. Most of the structure is relatively thin at around 10 centimeters thick, allowing the blood flow to diffuse the high heat generated by the central mass, which is a large lump approximately 2 meters high. This blood flow is provided by a large, central collection of hearts and a number of other hearts arrayed throughout SCP-763's structure. All the organs of the human body are present in SCP-763, located in a relatively even distribution throughout the system. The lungs are fed by a number of mouth-like round holes in SCP-763's skin. The feeding tubes pass directly into SCP-763 as though the flesh grew around them as its mass expanded. Researchers believe that the blood vessels and organs are essentially a support system for what has been designated the cluster. The cluster is an interconnected network of 37 human brains of varying sizes, connected by chains of cells resembling neurons. This array is enclosed by a multi-layered arrangement of bone growths. The bones most closely resemble ribs, though they exhibit offshoots that allow them to interlace into a tighter structure. Initial analysis revealed a far higher than normal amount of neurotransmitter activity. Over time the individual brains each enter a resting state with neural activity consistent with REM sleep, in time periods consistent with a polyphasic sleep pattern. This resting state lasts approximately 45 minutes. At any given time there are 5 brains in this resting state while the remaining 32 brains are in the active state. A collection of bone and nerve fibers resembling a spinal column approximately 3 meters in length extends from the cluster to join with the spinal column of SCP-763-A. SCP-763-A appears to be the body of the facility's former owner, Klaus. The body is only partially absorbed into the rest of SCP-763, retaining all its presumably original organs and general shape and structure. To date it has shown no signs of movement or further absorption. It should be noted that other absorbed subjects have been completely integrated into SCP-763 within 3 months. When SCP-763 was discovered, SCP-763-A was in a seated position, in which it remains. There was a table in front of SCP-763-A with a sheaf of papers on them, completely decayed from the warm, damp conditions of sub-basement G. SCP-763A's hand held a pencil, apparently poised to write. Any previous writing has been lost with the degradation of the paper. SCP-763A's facial expression is one of intense concentration or perhaps pain, with features contorted and eyes closed. Unlike the rest of the muscular tissue in SCP-763, SCP-763A is not atrophied, despite having exhibited no movement to date. Researchers assume that SCP-763A remains unabsorbed to function as an interface with the rest of SCP-763. To date, no stimulus has provoked a response from SCP-763A, other than autonomic reflexes and immune system response. Since its discovery by the Foundation, SCP-763 has incorporated biological material from 7 humans, 2 security personnel, 1 medical technician, 3 Class D personnel, and Dr. Dart. Direct skin contact with SCP-763 causes tiny barbs to hook into the skin and administer a paralytic neurotoxin. As soon as the subject is paralyzed, digestive acids are secreted and begin to dissolve the skin where contact was initiated. Once this is done, the skin will begin to heal at an accelerated rate, with the subject's skin now bonding with SCP-763. This process of dissolving and rehealing is repeated over and over, with the subject becoming progressively more integrated into SCP-763. After a subject is mostly absorbed, their organs begin to migrate to different areas, taking their place throughout the network as needed. In some cases, organs that are seemingly not needed are digested and used for additional nutrition. Most subjects have been fully absorbed within 2 months. Dr. S organs did not stop their movement until more than 3 months had passed. Researchers believe that this longer time was due to the inner cage around the cluster moving to accommodate the addition of Dr. S brain. To date, this is the only time at which a brain has been added, with all others digested.